Hello, my sisters and brothers in Christ, and continued happy Lent. You've been watching these videos, right? We had that one just the other day about the reverencing and the kissing of the altar, and we had gotten some notification, or someone reached out and said, does it have anything to do with the saints or the relics that are either in the altar or underneath the altar? Well, great question. So when we use that term relics, there was a time very early on in the church when the persecutions occurred, and believe it or not, just because of standing up for who we are as Catholic Christians, the culture was not supportive of that, and in many ways they physically tortured or killed believers. You hear about them going into the Colosseum and being eaten by lions and such, or the catacombs, which are the parts underneath Rome where people were found and killed, and there was a place for the faithful to go and pray. And so a tradition came probably in about the 3rd century, between around 250 to 270, the year 270. There was a pope, his name was Pope Felix, and he started to encourage, as churches were starting to be made, that whenever an altar was erected, remember, what happens at the altar? The holy sacrifice of the Mass occurs here. Calvary comes down, the sacrifice of Jesus on the altar. Well, he was saying that we should put altars above the sites of the martyrs. And so very often there would be a place, Saint so-and-so would have been buried there, and they would build a church or an altar and celebrate the Mass there. Again, the sacrifice of the Mass, the bloody sacrifice of those early saints. And so very, very early on and throughout history, there's either been a place within the altar, an altar stone, or underneath the altar, where there are saints' relics. What's a relic? It's a piece or a part of the saint, which is, some people are like, whoa, what's up with that? In some cases, it could be like a bone chip. In some cases, it could be like a tooth, or even like a particle of clothing that was used. And we use that as a sense of reverence. Remember in the scriptures, that woman who just touched the hem of Jesus's garment, and she was healed. And there have been miraculous stories where people have been healed by relics of saints. And so with that being said, altars were created, and believe it or not, people ask, what about here at St. William the Abbot? Great question. And so we do actually have 4 relics underneath the altar. The way I always try and remember it is, there's the 2 Johns, there's the William and the Bernadette. So we have St. John Vianney on this side, so on the transept. We have St. John Neumann, which is closest to the congregation. We have St. William the Abbot, who's down here on this side of the transept, and then St. Bernadette is in the back. So there are 4 spots underneath the altar where those relics are placed. And again, is that sign of reverence to put those holy sites and invite the saints to come in. Now, some people say, where does that come from? Did you guys just make it up? In the book of Revelation, chapter 6, verse 9, it talks about how from the base of the altar, the saints could be seen, right? So the souls of the saints could be seen. And so there's that sense of coming from underneath the altar. And as we said, heaven and earth come together right here. So the saints in heaven, and we're trying, with God's grace, cooperating with God's grace to become saints. And that occurs right here at the altar. So that's the significance of putting the relics or the saints underneath. Through time, it wasn't just the martyr saints. So at the very, very beginning with Pope Felix, like I mentioned, were always the martyrs. But throughout time, less and less people were being killed for the faith. It's still happening today. But then we would reverence and honor some of those saints for living a holy life. And with their, obviously, that we had those relics available. And even for us at St. William the Abbot, we have a relic, which is right here. Remember, St. William the Abbot's always in the north transept. And so he was not murdered, he was not martyred or murdered. And so we have, at the very, very beginning, the relics were of martyrs, where the altars were created. And as time went on, there were saints who lived holy lives, but the holy site. So that's why we create the altar above some of those that were not martyred. And for us, just as a reminder, we have St. John Vianney, who's underneath the altar, closest to the south transept. St. John Neumann, who is closest to the congregation in front. St. William the Abbot on the north. and Saint Bernadette in the south. So another great question, part of that reverence too is when we think as a priest, to be remembering those holy women and men that we honor and reverence because Christ is here at the altar of sacrifice, but also in their lives, their holy lives, we reverence them as well.